Okay.
My name is Roy Malone. I'm on the board of directors of Camp Douglas Restoration Foundation.
And I'm Bernard Turner. I'm also on the board of directors for Camp Douglas Restoration Foundation. And we are a 501(c) organization that is focused on telling the story of Camp Douglas, which people in Chicago and other places seem to have forgotten. As most people, or some people know, Camp Douglas was originally a Union camp that started during the beginning of the Civil War. And it was a place where soldiers came to actually join the Union Army. And over the course of time, as certain battles like Fort Donelson in Tennessee were lost, they decided to take some of the Confederate troops and bring them to Chicago and house them in Camp Douglas. And over the period of time, it was also a place where many of them perished because of very poor conditions. But we really want to tell the whole story of the Union camp, the participation of African Americans in the Civil War, and some other goals that we have.
Yeah, one of the goals is to build 2 barracks to replicate 2 of the 64 barracks that existed at Camp Douglas. And one of those barracks would be a visitor center, it would be a gallery, and then the second barracks would be a gallery that would represent the contribution of African Americans in the Civil War.
But what were the plans on the barracks? Where you have any place to put them yet, or are they going to be full sized?
Right now we're thinking about the barracks being where the Griffin Funeral Home is, and the Griffin Funeral Home is around 32nd and King Drive.
Which is just about 2 blocks from here.
About 2 blocks from here. Yes.
But there are other places where we might also be able to put the museum, and all in this neighborhood. But obviously it depends on getting cooperation from institutions or getting cooperation from other entities in the city.
What do you want
it's up in the air.
What do you want to put in the barracks?
We want to put memorabilia. We want to put pictures. We want to have stories. We want to have artifacts. We are also in the process of doing archaeological investigation. We started last summer right here in the Lake Meadows Park, and we've pulled out things that probably existed in the 19th century. So those are the kinds of things that we want to put in there.
Aren't you planning another dig this summer?
Actually, we are. We're planning another dig this summer. We're not sure exactly the location, but possibly at the Griffin Funeral Home location, which is 3232 South King Drive.
So this is where the headquarters was, correct?
Yes, the headquarters was just to our left, so to your right. We're finding, or I'm finding, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, that the more we talk about this, the more interest that is generating among Chicagoans. A lot of Chicagoans have never heard of Camp Douglas, and I'm going to say and admit right now that I had never heard about it until I met David Keller, who is on our board of directors. We want people to know that there was a camp here. We want to we've already started doing lesson plans and a curriculum so that students, especially students who live in this community, know that there was a camp here and that there were African American soldiers who spent time at that camp. We want the students to not only learn from the curriculum, but we want them to participate in an archaeological dig.
Well, very good. Is there anything else we can tell the viewers?
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Okay, and you can also take a look at our website, www.campdouglas.org.
www.campdouglas.org.
Yes.
That's it.
Hope everybody has that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Appreciate it a lot.
Okay.
in tape.
Just said you're on your website like 2 days ago.
Okay, we are now in Camp Douglas, actually Lake Meadows Park, just on the south side of Chicago. With me this evening is a man who wrote the book, and I say the book, on Camp Douglas, To Die in Chicago, George Levy.
Thank you. I believe that the main theme of the book is, were we two countries when the war started? A lot of historians say we were one country. They're wrong. And Camp Douglas shows that in many respects. For example, many of the officers did not understand the Southern prisoners because of their difference of language. Also, the Southerners ate much different meal than the Northerners did. For example, they didn't eat white bread. They only ate cornbread. In fact, prisoners said, we belong to a different country, therefore you have to treat us with respect, we're prisoners of war. That did not happen. Camp Douglas became the flashpoint for retaliation against Confederate prisoners for what was happening in Andersonville and Belle Isle and Libby Prison. And the retaliation against the prisoners resulted in a count of over 4,000 dead. Some people say 6,000. That could be the case. The camp is a study in contrast. Next to the brutality and the horror of Camp Douglas, for example, not giving them vegetables so they caught scurvy, that was deliberate. The beatings by the guards, the shootings of prisoners for minor infractions. Next to that, the government built the most modern prison camp of the Civil War, probably the most modern prison camp in the world. This camp here had running water toilets. No other camp ever had that. And that was an experiment. They built a hospital that had its own laundry with running water toilets inside. One inspector said, you know, the Civil War hospitals stink terrible because the toilets were in the building. But at Camp Douglas, there was no such stench. So it's a study in contrast. I believe that the administration of Washington used Camp Douglas as a testing ground. They wanted to see what can be done for a permanent camp base. And they did it at Camp Douglas.
Your book covers all this, of course.
The book covers all of that, yes. They ran sewer water lines from Chicago out to the camp to flush the toilets. And they built sewer pipes that unfortunately emptied into Lake Michigan. So all the filth from the camp polluted the lake out here at 31st Street. But no other camp had such a plumbing system where water came into the camp under pressure, just like in your home where you turn a faucet and the water would run. Camp Douglas had that. May I just add, Camp Douglas had its own fire department.
Really?
Yes. Because, of course, the buildings were very flimsy, dry wood, and no prisoner ever started a fire, which is an incredible record. There seemed to be an unspoken agreement that they would not start a fire because the camp commanders let them keep their matches. They needed them for the cigars. They were all addicted to nicotine. So in exchange for that, letting them keep their cigarettes, their matches, they did not start any fires.
So exactly, we're close to the headquarters here, isn't that correct?
The headquarters might be to the south of us.
To the south, right over here.
Right. We're in, I think, Garrison Square.
Garrison Square.
Right, yes.
Now we do have a mule over here if you want to ride it.
That was the other torture, right? The Camp Douglas mule, which was a board the prisoners had to sit on with the board turned up. And in the worst weather imaginable, sub-zero weather, they'd be shifted out there to ride on the mule if they caused problems. So again, Camp Douglas is a terrible measure in contrast. It was extremely modern. And on one hand, on the other hand, it was a cesspool of brutality.
And there was how many people here at times?
26,500 went through the camp during the war, but there was never more than 13,000 here at one time.
Here one time.
Exactly, yes.
And what about this mule? You know, most people don't know what that is.
The mule was a piece of wood stretched between two wooden horses, turned up. The prisoners would have to sit on that. It was quite painful. And by the way, that punishment was also inflicted on the guards who stepped out of line.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Now, what did they have another punishment with a ball and chain or something?
Ball and chain, and then there was a dungeon that was out there at East 31st Street, East 33rd Street, 33rd Place, called White Oak Dungeon.
Oh, okay.
And which was 12 feet underground with an open sink. The stench was horrible, and they put prisoners down there as punishment also.
Didn't you say in your book also about them having to either sit down on ice where the ground was frozen or stand there until the ice melted to the dirt?
Yes, one of the problems was the administration gave the camp guards full authority to do whatever they wish. But now, whenever you give a prison guard authority to do whatever he likes, you're going to get incredible brutality. So they would get drunk, rouse the prisoners out of their barracks, make them sit on the ground in snow and ice.
Wow. But where can people find your book?
It's on it's Hoarders, not Hoarders, Barnes and Noble. It's also on Amazon. Those are the two major places.
In the $20, $25 range?
Yes, about that range. Yes. Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about a book or about
Well,
you?
Camp Douglas, I think, makes clear the incredible brutality and inhumanity of the Civil War. Look, the Civil War has been terribly over-glamorized and romanticized. They're spending millions of dollars to buy strips of land in the South where men killed each other like animals. Camp Douglas attempts to show that there is no glamour in the Civil War. There is no romanticism. That it's a dirty, filthy, stinking war. And it all happened right here in Chicago. Another part of Camp Douglas was the treatment of black soldiers. Now, strange as it may seem, the Union Army captured about 11 blacks during the Civil War. Some of them were apparently soldiers. In retaliation against them, they were kept here for years before they were finally released. Out of the 11, only about 5 managed to survive the camp. So the treatment of blacks by the Union Army is horrendous. In fact, President Lincoln had to issue a bulletin to the camp commander. He was sending the officers to an officers' camp and letting them keep their slaves. And Lincoln had to send a telegram saying, look, you do not do that. You do not send the slaves back into slavery. And he did. That was quite early, in March of 1862, right at the very beginning. In fact, it was March 15th when President Lincoln sent that telegram to Camp Douglas.
Wow, that's incredible. And all right here on the south side of Chicago.
It all happened right here, yes. A very historic route. Yes.
Well, we appreciate the interview. And
it's a pleasure to be here.
We wish you luck with your book sales. Okay, this has been our Camp Douglas interview with George Libby, the author of To Die in Chicago. Thank you very much. Hey George, want to go ahead and get started with your slideshow?
Okay.
I think your generator's up and running, isn't it? Then you get the screen up. Okay, how you put this thing up? I ain't put the screen up in 50 years.
Nobody knows how to put a screen up.
No one, seriously, I had these in grade school. No one knows how to do the old time projections. Put that first. This. Match it. You pull it up. Turn it sideways. And then. Yeah, I remember. Yours are like, I feel old knowing how to put that together. I feel old knowing how to put that together.
No, don't back it up. You gotta get it to where.
He's got it. Do the bunny ears, do the bunny ears.
I want to learn. Okay. Is that a special camera you gotta get? No.
Yep. A little higher up. Do you have? Do you need a book, maybe?
Get two books and put it under.
Try that. Let's see if that's high enough.
No, use two of those.
No, you
books.
need one of your books. One of your books.
That's a little too bad.
Oh, intermediate. Here we go. We got here's an intermediate.
Robert Kiyosaki would love that.
That should be.
You know what? Whatever books these are, I apologize, but we're using this.
Those are lens books.
Those are actually mine.
These are your
Robert
books?
Kiyosaki.
Those. Yeah, and that's the best use they've gotten
Is this
ever.
school? And Rich Dad Poor Dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
And yes, I've hung out with Robert Kiyosaki a little bit too.
Okay, I was
He's
about
about to be a
I was
billionaire,
about to
so
ask
I'm
you
kind of
that.
behind him.
Rubbing those elbows.
There we go.
Oh, yeah.
That's looking
It's
good.
my shadow of the sun coming out the building reflected in.
It's
Yeah.
the reflection of the window.
See it? I'm right here in the shadow here.
But the sun's coming off the building reflecting is what's making
Yeah.
a shadow off of my head even. Crazy.
That's good. Right there's good.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
Okay, if everybody wants to have a seat, we can get started with the presentation.
Memento for me more.
Sure, you want to sit down?
Oh, no, I'm okay. Well, maybe not a bad idea.
Before we can sit down,
But
George.
people want to hear what I say, so I better stand up.
Oh, well, then I gotta move because I can't see you now because.
Uh-oh.
Someone's
I moved down a little bit. There you go.
Does anybody have an extra pen?
There's a whole thing of pins right at the other end of that
All right.
thing
That's
there.
right. You did bring pens.
Yep.
God bless the
Well,
hill,
this has to do with
Right.
what I said before.
And Carl.
About Camp Douglas being the most modern prison camp of the Civil War. This is Andersonville. And you can see up front where the prisoners had a dry toilet, just a slip trench. That was the only toilet facilities they had. The stench was unimaginable. And of course there was a lot of disease and sickness coming out of that pit. And see, they lived in ramshackle tents. They did not have barracks to live in. So if you compare Camp Douglas to Andersonville, you can see this was not a prison camp at all. It was just a garbage dump where they tossed human around in prisons. There's another shot of Andersonville. See, they had no permanent housing. They had no heat, they had no water. They had no hospital facilities either. Compared to Camp Douglas, its early stages, you can see the difference between Andersonville and Camp Douglas. Right up front, that would be Cottage Grove. That's the streets that we're looking at right up front. This is a picture of the plumbing system. Yeah, these are. No, this is not the one I want to show you.
Don't try.
Okay, this is a group of guards from Pennsylvania, and back there is the Graves house. Henry Graves owned all of the property where the camp is, about 80 acres. It wasn't like today where people stand under constitutional rights. Everyone's got to go to court, take it to a judge, get a court order. That's not like it was during the Civil War. The Army simply took over, moved in and said, we're taking it. And they took all 80 acres and built on it, built a camp on it. But Graves refused to move. And strangely enough, they didn't evict them. So they lived in that house all through the war. Now this is an incredible picture. And it has to do with what we're talking about tonight, which is paranormal activity. It's like a time frame. It's like going back in time. But it shows C.H. Jordan, the Undertaker, going through the camp and picking up bodies. You see his hearse? Right over there in that corner. He's got a hearse, and he's got a horse pulling his hearse, and he's going through the camp, picking up the dead. It's just like stepping back in time.
You're talking about right here, Uncle George?
Yeah, that's C.H. Jordan and his hearse. It's incredible that the photographer was able to pick it up without blurring. So I suspect that the hearse was stopped. And that's the time that the photographer took the picture. Oh, this is Colonel Hines, who's a Confederate agent. He is the one who founded the so-called Camp Douglas conspiracy of November 8th, 1864, where Confederates were going to rise up against the Guards, and outside Confederate agents were going to sweep in and capture the camp. 25 people showed up for his attack on Camp Douglas. That was the end of that. And he fled back to Canada. This is Colonel Strong. He was one of the strictest disciplinarians the camp ever had. He had charge of Prison Square only, and he made the prisoners work for the first time in the history of the camp. If the prisoners didn't work, they'd get battered around with a bayonet or a baseball bat. Interesting, he is the one who tried the so-called Camp Douglas conspirators. He's Judge Advocate's lawyer. His name is Barnett, and what's so interesting about it, he later was one of the judges on the Lincoln conspiracy trial. There's the University of Chicago, which was separated from the camp just by what you see, East 33rd Place is what separated the camp from the University of Chicago. At that time it was called College Street, and it was a 3rd Street no more than 16 feet wide. This was considered the finest university in the Northwest. Probably still is.
Wasn't the smallpox hospital very close?
Yeah, I may have a picture showing the smallpox hospital. It was right on the side of the university there. No, it's not there.
Was the left hand or the right hand
But
side
it's
of
in
the
the book,
slide?
though.
Right, it's in the book.
The book has a picture of this book. The Army used a cavalry barracks for the smallpox hospital. And they built one right next to the university. Stephen Douglas owned all of this land, except here. He never owned this 80 acres. But he owned everything on the south side of East 33rd Street, and he owned everything that's east of Cottage Grove. And, this is Mrs. Mary Morris. You know, if you want to talk about a love story, Camp Douglas has a love story. There's Mary Morris. She's quite ill at this time, taking the 1880s. She was a fanatical Confederate agent. She came from Kentucky. She married the mayor of Chicago, Mr. Morris. He, of course, was from Kentucky too, but he stayed out of Confederate business. She embraced it. When prisoners escaped, they went to her for money. And of course, when the Camp Douglas conspiracy folks was made up by Colonel Sweet, General Sweet, he nailed her as a chief conspirator. She was put on trial for her life, and so was her husband in Cincinnati, with a military commission. Does that sound familiar? Military commissions? We still have them today. All of the terrorists are being tried in front of a military commission, not a court martial, a military commission. And this is a holdover from the Civil War.
You're talking about down in Guantanamo.
Yeah, I think trials are taking place at Guantanamo. I'm pretty sure that's where the court is sitting. The trouble with the military commission is they never seem to hand down a witness verdict. So she was sent back to Kentucky by the Army Military Commission. Instead of executing her, they banished her back to Kentucky. She and her husband never lived together again. She took all the blame to protect her husband, Mr. Morris. So they never lived together again. She came back to Chicago around 1890 when her husband died. They were still married. It was 20 below zero. So she had to go back home. She never did attend the funeral. Her brother became the governor of Kentucky, and she acted as his first lady. Yeah, there's Mr. Morris, that's her husband. It was a May-December marriage, right? He was a widower in his late 50s with 2 married daughters, and she was about 22 or 23 when they got married. But no question, she loved him. She was willing to sacrifice her life for him in front of the military commission. Is that what I wanted to see? I'm looking for my drawing showing the sewer lines coming into the camp. I'm not sure. Let me take another look.
January 1st, 1865 is what it says.
Okay. And I'm not sure I've got it right yet.
It says 1865, so.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
January
Let me
1st, 1865.
Go to another graph. It's really dramatic to see the sewer lines coming into the camp. There. There. Okay. They served about 20 toilets. Each toilet had 40 stools for the men. And each regiment, each company of prisoners was assigned a particular toilet. If they used the wrong toilet, they'd be shot. And that's what happened once or twice. Sometimes they couldn't hold it, so they had to put the nearest for three. You can't blame the poor guys. But that was not allowed. Water is coming in from the east of the camp, coming down through the toilets. Each toilet had something like a fire hydrant, like you see today. And after the prisoners were through, they just turned the fire hydrant, and water under pressure would pump it all the way through the camp and out into Lake Michigan. So you wouldn't want to go swimming in Lake Michigan in those days. But compare this to Andersonville that we saw before, where the men are sweltering in these filthy pits. And here, the men have enclosed toilets. This is incredible. These are wash houses and Turkish baths built right in the camp. There's not much different than we have today. We had a coal stove that heated the water coming in from Chicago, and the men would go in there, turn the fire hydrants on, and get hot water out of their boiler, just like they do today. Right? At their home, we've got a hot water heater down in the basement. Not much different. Saturday night was wash night, where the prisoners would wash their clothes and take their showers and baths in 20-degree below zero weather. No other camp in the Civil War ever had wash houses with hot water running. I think there were 3 or 4 of these throughout the camp. And by the way, again, I keep saying, Camp Douglas is experimental. The government wanted to see what was possible. And Camp Douglas is not much different from camps of World War I. Oh, okay, this is, I'm glad this picture came up. This is the Elmira prison camp. The only reason I wanted to show it, you see the fence, the stockade with the guards on top? This was a standard stockade for Union prisons. So Camp Douglas had the same stockade. The western boundary of the stockade was King Drive. And they ran all the way over probably close to Rhodes. And almost down to East 31st Street. All of it Baptist Church, which is over 31st and King Drive. Everybody's familiar with it, somewhere over there. That marks the northwest corner of the camp. Now, doesn't this look like a World War II camp? You wouldn't think it's Civil War. Look, they even have, and then over on the left is a sutler's camp. The sutler's camp. The prisoners had money to go in and buy whatever they want. Look up in front, you can see the fire hydrant that the fire engines would hook up to. I think this gets set right here. So Camp Douglas, the city of Chicago, only had 5 fire engines. And Camp Douglas had 5. There's a better shot. You can see the barracks in the background. Compare this to Andersonville. There is no comparison. Andersonville is nothing but a garbage dump.
Is that a fire hydrant right there in the
Yeah, in
center?
the front.
Yeah, there's a fire hydrant there. There's 2 of them. Now one of them might be for drinking water. I suspect that one on the right
It would be for
is
drinking.
for putting out fires.
Yeah, I think so.
So this camp had running water. Now, of course, Chicago had the worst winters in history during the Civil War. And very often these hydrants would freeze up. The prisoners would try and get snow from under the guard line. And it gave a shock. Because they were using up all the snow in the camp. So they wanted to get beyond, I can't remember the name of it. It's a little line that the deadline. It's a deadline in front of the barracks. The prisoner stuck his hands out trying to get some snow, for God's sake. These stupid guards are shooting. Oh, there's a good drawing of the camp. And you see how high they're raised? That's because prisoners were coming out. They actually dug a mine coming out of East 3rd and 3rd Street. So the camp decided to raise these barracks so the guards could see under them. This is Colonel Lewis. He was severely wounded in the war. He's responsible for a lot of the cruelty because he commanded the guard force. And he's the one who gave the guards a blank check for cruelty. In fact, the guards had a committee. They came to Colonel Lewis and they complained that the guards did not let him hold religious services in their barracks. Seems reasonable that they should be able to hold services. Lewis said the guards do what they want to. This is another aspect of Camp Douglas that's incredible. There's a secret agreement between the North and the South. I say secret because if it ever got out, there would have been a revolution on both sides. This guy looks like he just stepped out of Mason's, right? He's a Confederate prisoner. He's been in the camp almost 2 years when this was taken. He's been in the camp since August 18, 1863. This picture was taken in February 1864. The North and the South entered into a secret agreement where each side would furnish their own prisons. In other words, the Confederates would send in uniforms for their prisoners, and the Union Army would send in uniforms to their prisoners, furnish tobacco, food, blankets, or whatever. So the Confederate government said, we're broke. We can't afford to support our prisoners. And what was the answer of Colonel Lakes? Send your cotton to New York, sell your cotton on the commodities exchange in New York. I'll be damned. Here comes a Confederate general, right? He goes up to New York, opens up a shop, and starts selling cotton that's shipped by rail from the South all the way to New York. And he made enough money to make that kind of uniform. However, this uniform was made in the North, which is even crazier. Northern contractors got the commission to make Confederate uniforms. How do I know? Those are wooden buttons. Northern manufacturers didn't have the dies to make the little gold buttons for the Confederate uniform. So we're going to see some that were made in the South. Look at the hair.
Well fed too.
Beautiful haircut.
Well fed.
10 cents in the barber shop.
He was well fed.
Yes. By that time, the food was going pretty good. This is taken in February of 1865. A lot of the food came in from the Confederate government. It's incredible. But here, someone's knocking on the door of Camp Douglas in January, February of 1865. Who are they? They're 3 Confederate officers, for God's sake. They are on the commission to distribute the goods, blankets, tobacco. Colonel Sweet was outraged because he didn't know about the secret agreement, so he wouldn't let them in. The War Department said to him, you better damn well let them in. You have an agreement. Now look, you see the craziness in this. Here you have the Atlantic Squadron blockading southern ports, so they can't ship cotton overseas. And here they're allowing the South to ship cotton up to New York by rail, sell it on the New York Stock Exchange so they can supply their prisons. Let me see if we have any more.
So by then, were we sending anything to Andersonville?
What's that?
Were we sending anything to Andersonville at that time? In exchange?
That's interesting. For some reason, I don't think anything went to Andersonville. Good question. It looks to me like the North never set up a commission. They didn't give a damn about prisoners in Andersonville. But the South did. Now look at these guys. These guys came into camp almost naked and barefoot. They were captured in battle in Nashville, December of 1864. I'm pretty sure. They were scarecrows in rags. I think I've got a picture. Somebody's supposed to look at it. In February of 1865. I think the guy in the center later became a state legislator in Kentucky. Now, look at their buttons. The one on the right, his jacket was made in the Confederate States. I think the one next to them, they have gold buttons too. I'm not sure about the one in the end. Look at their hair. There's a barber shop here. I think it's 10 cents a cut. So I got their hair cut every time.
It looks like the gentleman on the left has a better.
Yeah, this is called the Beale Agreement. The General Beale, B-E-A-L-E, was a Confederate general who was signed to New York. In fact, it was, I think it was Colonel Hoffman in charge of prisons. He was complaining that Beale put up a sign, Beale and Sons, dealer in the commodities, just like anybody else. Oh, this was one of the most hated camp commanders. This is, I can't think of his name, Bucky Land. You know, he is a sample of why the North won the Civil War. What was this guy? He was running a small newspaper. He was a farmer. He comes into the war and beats the hell out of the Confederate Army. He was really a great soldier. Unfortunately, he took prisoners into Camp Douglas, and there was no commander here. So the Army said to him, "You're it." So he became the commander of Camp Douglas. He hung prisoners by their thumbs to get information. He didn't hesitate to torture prisoners. Well, there's a good shot of Camp Douglas. I think this is the one that you have to picture of. Yeah. That's Colonel Sweet's daughter. He was the last commander of Camp Douglas. That was taken when she was about 28 in 1870. So she would live in the camp throughout the war. So you wonder what a small child would be doing here. She's only about 12 years old now. Well, she got in the streetcar. It was outside here at 31st and King Drive. And she rode the streetcar downtown to go to school at the Catholic school on Wabash and Jackson. Everybody thought Colonel Sweet was Catholic while she went to Catholic school. There's Colonel Sweet. He's the only camp commander who did not win a star on the battlefield. There are a number of brigadier generals who, for example, Landis, a brigadier general, he won a star in battle. All the other commanders won a star in battle. He won a star for the hoax he created called the Camp Douglas Conspiracy. His attitude on the prison is unbelievable. Even Washington said to him, "Look, you got plenty of money in the kitty. Why did you buy vegetables for the prisoners who suffer from scurvy?" He said, "Tell them no." So that's why about 800 prisoners got scurvy here. This is some of these names I stated to me, but he was Lincoln's favorite. He was a lawyer and a partner of Lincoln's, Leonard Swett was Lincoln's good friend. He was a partner in his law office before the war, so he could get anything he wanted. He became the commander of Camp Douglas around December of 1864, and he was able to get things that no other camp commander could get. For example, he got overcoats for all the prisoners. No other commander could do that, because he was Lincoln's favorite. Whatever he wanted, he got.
I apologize. His name again, Mr. Levy? His name again? His name? Sorry, over here.
It's in the list of illustrations, yeah.
His name? Sorry.
Anybody have a book? I'll find it.
Look right here.
Sorry, Mr. Levy.
It's not her then, is it? law partner?
So sorry.
His law partner?
Yes.
Was his law partner the same?
A law partner of Lincoln's law partner.
Not Herndon then.
Okay, when Lincoln became president, he left his law practice in Springfield in charge of Leonard Sweat.
Okay, is that
And he
Sweat?
became Leonard Sweat's partner.
Was his name Herndon?
No. I know, I've heard that name. It wasn't Herndon. Well, here it is. William Ward Orme, O-R-M-E. He was relieved of command of the prison camp because of his lenient attitude towards the prisoners. Giving them food, holding meetings with them, asking what they needed, and of course the Washington stomach back. So he was replaced with Colonel Strong, and eventually he was dismissed from commanding Camp Douglas. What's interesting about him, when he took over, he found 4 black prisoners left over from 1862. So he wanted Washington, how come these prisoners have been there for so long? So Washington said, well, if the soldiers don't let them go, if they're servants, you can't. So we branded all of them servants, and they all left Camp Douglas. They had been there to the end of the war, but for General Orme. So he had, unfortunately, he died in 1865 of tuberculosis. He had a very short life. Another thing, he was pretty far advanced. His wife wrote him a letter saying, I'd like to take a job. He was in Bloomington, Illinois. He said, I'd never tell you what to do. Do you want to take a job too? So his attitude towards the marriage was unusual. Oh, there's the Braves house that we saw in the other photograph. This is in 1865, so the camp is pretty much gone, and that's his family. It looks like a horse sitting there. It looks like 2 of his daughters over on the right. Braves lived to be almost 100. In 1910, he was still in this house. They named the street after him. Oh, this is, I think it's an Army passport. When prisoners were released in 1865, they were given tickets to go home. And I think this is one of them. Yeah. Okay. This has to do with why you're here tonight. Camp Douglas is the only prison camp that destroyed the dead and the living. No other camp did what was done to Camp Douglas prisoners of war. For example, almost 4,000 died, over 4,000 died, but by 1865, they could not find more than 2,000 graves, and those were questioned. Those were in back of the present Historical Society up there in Lincoln Park. The cemeteries between the Historical Society and what's now the off-ramp going on to North Avenue. I know you're familiar with the Historical Society. When the war ended, the government did not even know what happened to these prisoners. It took a special investigation to do it. In Elmira, New York, when a prisoner died, he had his own undertaker, an escaped slave named John W. Jones. And he would bury the prisoners in a plot that was rented for that purpose and kept a careful record of every grave and its name. Now, almost 3,000 dead were all identified in Elmira. And they all had brand new insults. Underneath this monument, somewhere, it's a cemetery for the prisoners who were brought from Chicago and buried in Oakwoods. I say somewhere, because nobody really knows what happened. Apparently in 1867, the government let a contract to 2 politicians, powerful Republican politicians. General Grant was in office at that time. They had no experience in moving dead anywhere. Nobody really knows what happened, but supposedly they brought 4,000, no, government said only 2,000, into Oakwood Cemetery and buried them under this monument, where the monument is now. So if you went to Oakwoods, you wouldn't see a single grave. Where are they? They're 12 feet down. So Camp Douglas destroyed the dead and the living. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that. us old-time graduates of Camp Douglas in the ages. I was going to say something about let's see. Oh, Army owned, you might wonder why Oakwoods. Army owned a 2-acre tract in Oakwoods since 1861. They thought they were burying Union soldiers there. But all the Union soldiers went to Roseville. Roseville was the 57th organization. So, when these prisoners started dying, the question was, could they go to Roseville? Roseville said no. We don't want any Confederate prisoners inside our cemetery. And that's how they ended up with Oakwoods. Oh, someone asked about the rail. Oh, these are Morgan's Raiders. And you can see they're almost like irregulars. Very few of them have any standard uniform. And Morgan's Raiders really were, they called themselves the 14th Kentucky, but there was no record of them in Richmond. And they only had one thought, and that was to escape.
Didn't they go against Confederate orders
What's that?
when they raided Kentucky? That they disobeyed the orders of President Davis and Robert E. Lee?
Not too organized. Oh, you mean the
Raiders did.
Morgan's raid? Yes. Yes, he went off on his own. He did a raid through, I think, Kentucky, Ohio, and into Indiana, and they were all up there at the, I think, the Ohio River called Buffington Island, and then shipped up to Chicago, and they were here from August 18th until the war ended. You see, it's quite early. They don't have any General Beals uniforms, which is dated 1862. This is the only hero of Camp Douglas. No, this is Lincoln's brother-in-law. I'm sorry. Again, I can't remember his name, but he was the captain of commissary. In other words, it was his job to buy goods, wares, and merchandise and ship them to Chicago to go to Camp Douglas. He was taking kickbacks from his contractors. So it became a big scandal, and he was going to be court-martialed. Lincoln saved us behind. He ordered him sent to Chicago, and everything would be quiet. And Chicago got into trouble again. He's buying bad beef from contractors. So he ended up at Camp Douglas. He is Mary Lincoln's brother-in-law. He was married to Mary Lincoln's sister.
So he's from Kentucky?
it's
He's from Kentucky then?
Was he from Kentucky?
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think he was born in Illinois.
but it's an in-law of an in-law.
Yes.
Okay.
He has some good qualities. While he sat in the Illinois State Legislature in 1853, he had the public school act. So Illinois became one of the few states that had public schools that educated children at public expense. Mary Lincoln went to live with him and her sister about 1870, when she was sent to a mental institution wrongfully, and then the appellate court released her, so she went to live with him and his wife near where her husband is buried. These are just more old graduates of Camp Douglas. Oh, this is on the east side of Cottage Grove. That little house may still be there. That is all Steve Douglas property. This was the camp's chaplain. He thought that the Southern prisoners are the most ignorant prisoners in the world, that not any of them could read and write, but he was wrong. Okay, there's the name of the photographer, B.F. Random. He had an office right here in Camp Douglas. It's interesting. After the war ended, he moved downtown to Clark and Madison. And you know what happened in 1871. All of his photographs were destroyed. So the only photographs that survived are the ones this was. Oh. this looks like, yes, that's the east side of King Drive. That's where the stockade was, where those cars are, on that side of the street. There's the Baptist church. That church stands in the far northwest corner of the prison camp, and that's East 33rd Street. Of course, there's a lot of street widening that went on. In my opinion, this church, the camp boundaries went out to the middle of King Drive because a lot of land was taken for the street widening. There, this is the open field that is part of Camp Douglas. This is where the prisoners first lived before they built Prison Square. And the dungeon, White Oak Dungeon, was right there behind that white car. I'm taking a look. This is the townhouses I'm in. This is where the camp entrance was, where these townhouses are now. Oh, there's Mr. Graves. Okay. Of course, his land became incredibly valuable because Camp Douglas land became the first gold coast in Chicago. This is where all the wealthy came to build their houses. Of course, they're all gone by the turn of the century, and that's when they started building slums. Oh, this is an example of the beautiful letters that were printed. Actually, I got some better ones. The irony was that the person wanted to write home. He needed an envelope of paper, right? The only place you got to be the Sutler. But the Sutler only had patriotic paper and envelopes. So they were sending letters home with the Union Forever.
Wow. Sit down.
There. Just beautiful. It's just lithographic. So that was the irony of these letters. They're beautiful, isn't it? You see it's got the federal shield. So these people in the beach were having the mail had the federal shield on it. By the way, I'm surprised that letters could be delivered in the deep south. I wouldn't blame you for being surprised. But the post offices paid no attention. The Northern Mail went down to someplace called City Point, Virginia. It was transferred to the southern boat. The southern boat would transfer its mail to the northern boat. And so mail continued to flow up and back throughout the war. That's just beautiful. I think that's another picture of the prosecutor in Lincoln trials. I think that does it. The reason I say this is the best place for paranormal activity is because no one really knows what happened in Camp Douglas Day. The difference was that the quartermaster was regular army in Chicago. At Camp Douglas. He had the authority to find a graveyard, to find a cemetery for these Confederate prisoners. Instead, he farmed it out to a criminal named C.H. Jordan, an undertaker in Chicago. Jordan was getting $4.89 per burial. Incredible, because coffin only cost $1, and the plot only cost 50 cents at the city cemetery. So he was pocketing about $3 for every burial he made. In my opinion, he was splitting that with the Chicago Department, Camp Douglas quartermaster, because nobody ever watched what he was doing. He would take the Camp Douglas dead down to the city cemeteries where they were buried, and make a park, turn them over to a city mortuary, pay him 50 cents for the grave, and that's it. Nobody ever really knew what happened to these prisoners. So the reason why the Camp Douglas dead were destroyed was because of corruption on the part of the quartermaster in Chicago. At Elmira, the quartermaster there hired the sexton of Woodlawn Cemetery to take care of the dead. He demanded record keeping for the dead that was taken. When I was there, we was only paid $1.85 for burial, not $3,489. Let me give you another camp, and you might be surprised. Andersonville. Would you be surprised to know that Woods was the camp commander? He allowed the prisoners to bury their own dead. So they manufactured a very good cemetery. One of the prisoners kept careful records of the grave number and the names. So believe it or not, the Andersonville Cemetery is a well-documented burial ground. If you go there, you see 13,000 headstones with their names on them and the grave numbers. That did not happen at Camp Douglas. That's the problem. The quartermaster did not let the prisoners bury their own dead. That's where all the corruption came. I think that's it.
Any questions?
Mr. Levy, may I ask what Woodlawn Cemetery has to do with Camp Douglas? May I ask what Woodlawn Cemetery and Camp Douglas, how do they coincide? You just mentioned that. There's a reason.
The Woodlawn Cemetery was in Elmira, New York. It has a beautiful cemetery from the Civil War.
Okay.
Whereas Camp Douglas simply destroyed its dead by turning them over to C.H. Jordan.
So they were more dignified in their burials versus Camp Douglas.
There was no dignity at Camp Douglas. Nobody really knows what happened except the investigator after the war found out that C.H. Jordan was getting $404.89 for burial, and he's dumping them in graves at City Cemetery. And he said, look, there's fraud here. Jordan was never indicted. And neither was the Camp Douglas quartermaster. Plus, nobody cared about this competitive law. I think that's it.
Yeah, there was a lot of fraud involved when they moved to City Cemetery. There's a lot of corruption there. Somebody else had a question?
I got one question. Excuse me. The area that we're sitting in now, what do you believe was here?
What was here?
Where we're sitting now?
This exact location.
This exact location, what do you believe was here in the camp?
What was here?
Part of the camp was here?
This is
standing right now. What's the
This is part of Garrison Square.
Okay.
Garrison Square extended right about here. You know, there's an interesting fact between about here and East 31st Street was probably owned by a lady who inherited the land from Mr. Graves. So I believe Garrison Square stopped about here. And beyond this was this lady's, Mrs. Bradley. I remember her name at least.
Okay, so what would have been out here?
This is all the camp.
This would have been the camp?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Everything south of Mrs. Bradley, all the way over to King Drive was Camp Douglas.
The headquarters was right out there, wasn't it?
Yeah, headquarters is right here somewhere.
Right over
Where
there.
was the hospital?
Right in here.
Where was the hospital?
Okay, the hospitals were over at East 33rd Place.
So we're not near there, are we? That's much farther down here.
Go straight northeast 33rd Place. There's an apartment building on the south side of the street, and the campus is on the west side. That's what the hospitals were.
33rd place and what? 33rd place and what?
East 33rd Place.
And what's
and
across the
Cottage
street?
Road.
Oh, Cottage Road?
Yeah, Silver Street.
Len, I'm gonna grab all your stuff. Do you want me to leave it quick?
Yes, all right. Anything else for George?
What prompted you to write the book?
Thanks.
What prompted you to write the book?
He was my history professor at the University of Chicago. He was a very eccentric guy. He had a piano in the classroom, and he would play World War I song, singing in a whiskey voice. What a great teacher. But he was always insistent that the university was ashamed of its heritage, that it was a crux of a prison camp during the Civil War. But he never would give the name or any other information. He said, I love it, someday I want him to write the book. So I'm going to tell you, this is state punishment, it's supposed to be. Teachers can be dangerous.
Absolutely.
Any more questions?
She did have one question. It's kind of thought about before, like for
those who didn't know what happened to these soldiers who were buried, I mean, did their families, like, did they ever find out, like, that they were never buried or anything? Did they, like, try to sue them or anything?
Good question. Wealthy Kentuckians would contact C.H. Jordan when they were notified of the death. Interesting to say that. The camp was very lenient, would allow the use of the camp telegraph to notify families of the death of a loved one. So they could come up to get the body if they wanted to, but none did. They used C.H. Jordan. He would ship the bodies south for about $180.
Yeah.
So the camp, the families in the south were notified of deaths, yes. And it became known that they're not all notebooks. So we held the cemetery party in April. Memory of the dead, they were there under that monument.
Is that the one that's considered then the largest mass grave? Is that the one that?
Yes, it's the largest one. It's the largest one in the world.
I heard in the Western Hemisphere, but I don't know if that's true.
The problem is Elmira has almost 3,000 dead that are accounted for, every single one. And Camp Douglas, really nothing's accounted for. We know 46,000 died, but we got their bodies back.
So for those who were buried, I mean, it's like I said, the families were notified. Did they ever like hold any type of like funeral for those, even though they couldn't find their bodies, so the families could, kind of like
services.
Services,
oh,
yes.
Yes, they would be down south, absolutely. And if they wanted to come up, chances are they never would be able to find the body anyway, because it was dumped into the swamp over there at the city cemetery. So if they notify C.H. Jordan immediately, he would put that body in his own dead house at City Cemetery, which was between the Historical Society and the off-ramp goes on to North Avenue.
Dead house, did you say? You said his dead house?
Yeah, we call it that morgue, we would call it morgue, but they called it the dead house in those days. So he would hold out that prisoner, as he had a telegram to the family, and put him in his dead house, seal it in a special casket, a very casket, and send it south with $800.
I can't help but wonder if there was at most 10,000 guys here. In a Chicago summer, the beaches are full of people. When was the pollution worse then or now? Just in terms of the number of people that live in Chicago now compared to back then, it was just a fraction. Back then you had like 500 to 600 people.
So
it's like back then you had 500 to 600
tonight,
people.
remember, there are all these lost souls. No one knows what happened to actually any of these bodies, because when the contractors moved them from City Cemetery to Oakwoods, they kept no records. So no one really knows what's in their records.
How does this compare to Libby Cemetery? Libby was the work at.
Libby, was a warehouse. I'm not sure where they buried the dead persons. I'm not sure.
How was their sanitary conditions though? A little bit better than here?
Libby conditions?
Yeah.
Worse. Yes. Very good sanitation. And cool guards, so it was Libby that caused all, one of the camps, Libby, that caused all the cruelty at Camp Douglas.
Thank you.
Very interesting.
Well, stay tonight. You're in the right place for paranormal activity. There's so many lost souls from Camp Douglas. I hope someone will check in with you. They never reached Oakwoods.
George Wood switch on also. Good. All right, everybody want to give one last applause for George Levy taking his time down here and giving us a great presentation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I kind of get everybody gathered around. We're in a restricted area. Later on tonight, we're going to walk right across the street in the area over there. And then also we'll be going down the street
that area down there, across the street from the grocery store.